Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're here for a very, very special day. Kaveh. I just said that just to rhyme. It's actually not a special day. It's Kaveh's analysis. And this should be roughly releasing at the same time as the Baiju one. So whichever one you've come from, welcome. We're going to look at this character now that's on the screen. Mr. Kaveh, the Imperial Reflection, he's releasing alongside Baiju. He's El Haytham's compatriot and so, law drop, whatever, whatever. We're just going to look at his kit for today. He's a Dendro character if you can't tell, and as for weapon, I do believe, doesn't say here on the front, but I believe it is a Claymore, right? It's a Claymore weapon. Now, before we get into his actual kit, if you want to know his materials, here it are. You've got some of these bad boys, I can't even remember their name, Morning Flowers, which I believe they're found in the Aspiritavana swamp. These are a new material being added in the next patch, obviously released alongside him, so you won't be able to ascend him, I think, to level 90 in one day, unless they obviously give you enough in one day. Dendro things, crowns, this is the Dendrohydroculus, I was about to say that, the Dendroculus, sorry, my apologies, the Dendroculus, and then you also have the new world boss being added, which is a Dendro Dragon, and again, the fungi material. If you are looking to ascend him to 90 in one day, well, you better start pre-farming, because we are getting very, very close to his release. Now, with that all out of the way, Mr. Dendro Claymore Kaveh being known for his materials, let's get into his kit. Now, again, basic attack is not super relevant. I'll reference back to it once we get to his burst, but for the most part, his basic attack is not extremely relevant. I would recommend, though, getting it at least up to 6, just to be safe. But again, it's just a basic standard attack. There's actually no crazy things about it. Going on to his skill, though, Artistic Ingenuity. Use Marak's mapping ability for offensive purposes, initiating a radical scan that deals AoE Dendro damage. It will also scan all Dendro cores in its AoE and cause them to immediately burst. That is a unique part, but first of all, it's just you scan the area and deal AoE Dendro damage. That's all it is. The extra effect is this ability to instant burst Dendro cores. Now, it's a new ability introduced, a kind of ability introduced by Kaveh. He's the only one who does this. But essentially, if you spawn a Dendro core, you combine Hydro and Dendro, a core is spawned. If you now hit it with Kaveh's ability, it'll happen instantaneously. You don't have to wait for it anymore, or you don't have to exceed the limit of Dendro cores on the field. You can just hit it with Kaveh's ability and deal damage. Now, the skill damage itself will be this, and that's this percentage here defines the first bit of damage. The Dendro core damage is defined by who created the Dendro core, right? That's still defined by who created it. So you don't get a damage bonus yet on his skill. 6-second cooldown as well. That's pretty good for an offensive ability. Pardon me, I just burped. That was very bad. I'm just a bit gaseous right now. But yeah, the cooldown is fine. And ability-wise, this is fine. Like, it's a unique ability. And his role in the team is, the best way I can describe it is, Kaveh is a sub-active... No, active sub-main DPS. Active sub-main DPS. Let's use that term. Active sub-main DPS. I'll explain that when we get to his burst, and I talk about a bit of synergy between some other characters. But that's what his skill does. Now for his burst. Painted Dome. Completely unleash Marak's energy and creates a cubic scanned space, dealing AoE damage, Dendro damage rather, to all opponents within it, causing all Dendro cores in its AoE to immediately burst, and granting Kaveh the following enhanced combat abilities for a specific duration. You increase Kaveh's normal, charged, and plunging AoE, attack AoE, and converts his attack damage to Dendro damage, right? So all of these things have increased attack and AoE, so I believe that also means they'll just hit further, right? And then all Dendro cores created by all of your own party members through Bloom reactions will deal additional damage when they burst, which is essentially a constant buff to Bloom reactions, which is very specific to Bloom, by the way, very specific to Bloom. It's, it's going to be hard to do something with Burgeon or Hyper Bloom with this guy, but yes, it's Bloom. And then resistance to interruption is increased. These effects will be cancelled once Kaveh leaves the field, right? So, simple, right? Simply put, he deals AoE Dendro damage when he casts it, he pops all Dendro cores when he casts it, and then he has an increased AoE to all of his attacks, as well as a Dendro damage override that cannot be overridden by anything else, so he is safe to use with Bennett if you really want to. And then all your Bloom damage is increased, right? Those are the 5 things that the burst does right now. The interruption to resistance is mostly negligible if you really... if we're going to be absolutely honest. in the recommendations that I'll recommend in just a second here, it might be very important. But just to go over the percentages before I go into those character recommendations, the skill damage of the actual AoE Dendro damage is 288, which is, it's not high, but it's, it's not the main part of the actual burst, so it's negligible. You can kind of like just be okay with that. 12-second duration on the whole painted dome, which is fine. And then Dendro core burst damage bonus is 50%. We're going to just round it up because 50% sounds nicer. Overall, pretty good. And then a cooldown of 20 seconds, energy cost of 80, meaning we're going to have an 8-second downtime on this, which is absolutely fine for the recommendations that I'm going to make for the characters. As for the damage bonus for the Dendro cores, 50% overall flat increase to their damage. If you're hitting for, 10k per bloom, now you're hitting for 15k per bloom, right? That's kind of just how it works. Mathematically. But now, as for those recommendations, Kaveh, as I said earlier, he's an active sub-main DPS. That's a really hard thing to say confidently and also understand if it's not explained. So let me explain it. He's going to be your active character because obviously his damage phase, or your damage phase, if you're using him, is going to be during his burst. His skill doesn't do much damage. And because obviously if you cast his burst and then leave, the field is cancelled. So he's going to be the active character during the burst. But he is not the main DPS, even though you are using him. Here is why. Most of his damage comes from bloom reactions, and he potentially will be the one spawning them, but they are not going to be based on his damage, or they're not going to be technically based around him. He's just there as an extra, like, to increase the damage. The recommendation is the Nilo team. The Nilo, Kaveh, Yao Yao, Barbara, or some shit like that, or Yijing Cho, or Yalan comp, right? So the Hydro Dendro team with Nilo is going to be my wholehearted recommendation and probably the best comp for him. Now, will you be able to run him with a lot of other teams? Absolutely, if you want to. If you can make it work and if you think you have the confidence to do it, go for it. He is a Dendro character based around Bloom, but if you want to try to run him with other stuff, be my guest. But his best build is going to be something to do with the bountiful cores created by Nilo. And that is the core part of this, is that Nilo will be doing a brunt of the damage, but she'll be getting boosting from Kaveh to the highest level with a massive 50% increase to her already extremely high damage on her bountiful cores. Now, you may be thinking, well, does it all help? Well, here's the thing. The part that doesn't help the most is probably causing all the Dendro cores to burst immediately. The same thing with the skill. You don't really need that because Nilo's cores already explode pretty quickly. So this doesn't help you. That part doesn't help you overly much, but everything else is extremely good. The reason for this is if you run it with the comp that I just kind of recommended, let's say you go for a Nilo, you go for a Kaveh, you go for a Yao Yao just for healing, and then you also go for a, or maybe if you want Baiju, you can go for that for healing, and let's go, say you go for a Yalan. Well, because Kaveh's attacks are overwritten by his normal charge and plunging have an AoE increase and overwrite to Dendro, that means he is the Dendro applicator. Obviously, he's going to be spawning the blooms, but obviously because now they're bountiful cores because of Nilo, it's based on Nilo. And so that part is already incredibly powerful there. So he's now the Dendro applicator, and so now you've got Nilo's a Hydro ring around her, and then you've also got a Yalan's ultimate applying all the Hydro, and now you've got Dendro, Hydro making infinite bloom, whilst you have all these buffs up, which is extremely powerful. Yalan also increases burst damage. He doesn't necessarily increase his damage, but it's great. And so that is the team that I'm going to recommend as of right now. There's definitely many teams that you can do, but that I believe it will be his best in slot is going to be in a Nilo comp. That is his burst. That was a long spiel about his burst, but I did want to make it clear where I think he does belong. And although you can try to run him in other comps, good luck with it, because he only has bloom damage increase in this part. So good luck with that, but not my recommendation. Now moving on to his passives. First one, an Architect's Undertaking. When damage dealt by Dendro Core, including Burgeon or Hyperbloom, hit Kaveh, he will regain HP equal to 300% of his Elemental Mastery. This can be triggered once every 0.5 seconds, so he doesn't necessarily take reduced damage from Dendro Cores, but he can heal from them through 300% of his Elemental Mastery, which is not a lot of damage, but seeing as you're not also taking a lot of damage from them, so it kind of pays out if you have enough Elemental Mastery. Now, will you run Elemental Mastery on this character? I'm not so sure, because a lot of his bloom boosting damage doesn't really come from a percentage. you're just going to probably run crit damage, crit rate, attack percent on him just to get as much damage from his actual attacks as much as possible. And that's going to be that, really. I don't know if you'll go for Elemental Mastery. Next passive, a Craftsman's Curious Conception. During Painted Dome, after Kaveh's normal charged or plunging attack hit an opponent, his Elemental Mastery will increase by 25. This can be triggered once every 0.1 seconds, max 4 stacks. This will be cancelled when Painted Dome's effect ends, right? So there's no duration on the stacks. It just ends once the actual ultimate ends. So it's pretty good. And as for the last one, when Kaveh crafts landscape, buildings, or courtyard type furnishings, he has a 100% chance to refund a portion of the materials. It's for the teapot. So overall, we've just covered everything. He's a pretty good character, but he's very niche and he's going to be very specific to very specific teams. Now, if you're looking to play this character as one of your favorites, by all means, don't let that, like what I just said prior to him being very niche, hold it back. If you really like this character, you can make it work. Genshin's a very free game, and Genshin's a very easy game. You can just build him with crit damage, crit rate, and attack percentage, and you'll be just fine, because obviously a lot of his damage is based around those stats. You don't really need Elemental Mastery or HP or Defense. You don't need those stats. So just build him for DPS, and you'll have a DPS character. But you'll also have a good supporter, right, for this specific team. So if you just so happen to run him, in those comps, you'll have an even better time. But a quick summary of the base kit, because this is without any constellations. He is mainly a Nilo supporter, right? Nilo supporter or Bloom supporter, depending on wherever the hell you want to put him, right? It's not Hyper Bloom, it's not Burgeon, at least from a word value standpoint. It specifies Bloom damage here. Now, will it actually mean Bloom damage? I'm not sure. On testing day, probably there's going to be a lot of guides coming out telling you, but this is an analysis from just like words, so just take what I say about this very specific part with a grain of salt. But regardless of that, it's going to be very, very niche character. Now, I did say before that the auto attack or the basic attack might want to level up, because standalone, the character is obviously a support. But because he only scales with crit damage, crit rate, and attack percentage, he doesn't have any other scaling stats. If you just build him for those stats and get all of his talents and abilities and ultimate up to level 10, you're gonna have an optimal supporter as well as an optimal main DPS. So if you do happen to run him with his optimal team, you can also build him as the technical main DPS, even though he won't be dealing, he himself through his auto attacks won't be dealing the highest damage. He can still deal a lot of damage if you do it correctly. And obviously because he's Claymore, there's a lot of options. I'll get into that once we get to the weapon section. So pretty good kit. But now let's move on to the constellations. And starting off with Constellation 1, Sublime Salutations. Within 3 seconds after using his Artistic Ingenuity, which is his skill, Kaveh's Dendro resistance and incoming healing bonus will be increased by 50 and 25 respectively. It's fine, bit of damage reduction from Dendro, essentially a damage reduction to Dendro, and because he's going to be taking Dendro damage from the cores, it's cool, and healing bonus if he needs to be healed really quickly, that's fine as well. Going on to Constellation 2, Kaveh's normal attack speed increased by 15 during his ultimate Painted Dome. It's fine, it means you're going to be getting a lot more bloom reactions going if you are in an excess of Hydro damage dealt. You can go now and now have equal Dendro damage application, thus to get more blooms going. And as for number 4, Dendro cores created from bloom reactions Kaveh triggers will deal 60% more damage when they burst. Now here's the part where it's a bit tricky with triggering and a lot of the rate of application with your characters. It says specifically, Dendro cores created when from bloom reactions Kaveh triggers. So Kaveh has to be the instigator and triggerer of these reactions. Now, 9 times out of 10, if you're running him in the comp that I kind of recommended, 9 times out of 10, Dendro will be the triggerer because you have much more Hydra application than you do Dendro application. But here's the kind of kicker. Maybe you don't even want to run a second Dendro character. Maybe with this specific one here, because he has to be the one to make the bloom reactions. Maybe you want to run him as a solo. And so that's when the team recommendation of something like Kaveh, Nilo, Barbara, Yelan, or Kaveh, Nilo, Jesus Christ, it's taking a while to get these characters out. Kaveh, Nilo, Barbara, Xingqiu. Xingqiu is interchangeable with Yelan. Barbara is also interchangeable with Yelan, Xingqiu. Just whatever gets you the highest Hydra application, you can then use Kaveh as a solo and kind of go with there. As long as you have a healer, by the way. Just try to make sure to have a healer just to stay alive, because you're going to be taking a fair bit of damage from a lot of different sources. So this Constellation specifically is maybe where you want to go into a little bit more Hydro, so you can also get him being the one to create it. But regardless, it's a very powerful constellation. 60% increase to the ones that he triggers is very good. And obviously, if you go for like one of those comps, you can also have him be the reactor and causer of the explosions with his skill. But that's another point in itself. Very good constellation, probably his strongest one. And then lastly, Paradisia's Dream. Constellation 6, when Kaveh's normal charging or plunge attack hit opponents during the painted dome, they will unleash this Paradisia's light upon the opponent's position, dealing 61% of Kaveh's attacker's AoE Dendro damage and causing all Dendro cores within that AoE to burst. This can be triggered once every 3 seconds. Now, this is great. This is incredible. This is amazing. Now, let me make some points here about this one. It's just extra Dendro damage, but an overarching point here is that you may notice that it's all about Kaveh dealing AoE Dendro damage, and it's all about him causing Dendro cores to burst. Now, one thing to note about that is that you can also just do a Bloom build. Let's say you can do, if you want to do a really just simple Bloom build, let's say you don't have a Nilo, and you want to just use him as the main DPS. Because I was talking a bit more of a situation of where I think he stands. If you want to use him in something like he's the only guy causing the Bloom damage, and all the Bloom damage is based around him, you can do that. And that's going to be centered around him being in the team, and then 3 Hydro characters. But those 3 Hydro characters are not Nilo, right? One of them is just not Nilo. And what would that team look like? Well, you can do something as simple as Kaveh, Sangonomiya Kokomi, Xingqiu, and Yelan. And that will net you some of the highest Hydro application possible, and Kaveh is going to be 100% the one dealing damage. Now, that is 100% a doable comp, and if you have that, go for it. It'll really be super powerful, because if you have C6 of him, every 3 seconds you get a auto proc of all of the Bloom things, as well as on, if you're, timing your skill with it, it's on a 6-second cooldown, so you let the C6 proc once, and then, 2 seconds later or 1 second later, when you create a few more, you use the skill, and then so on and so forth, and it's a nice cyclical effect. But that is really, I think, only if you have C6, because you kind of need that constant popping of Bloom reactions. You don't really want to have a downtime. You want constant popping, and every 3 seconds lets you build up enough to have it actually, be worthwhile. After if you don't have the C6, then it's every 6 seconds that it pops, and that's kind of that's a bit longer. A burst of damage every 6 seconds. Maybe some buffs will drop off, maybe something else will drop off. So I think with his C6, you can go for a bit more freedom. I think with C is anything below C6, it's most optimal to have the damage be coming through Nilo, because her bountiful cores pop a lot quicker, right? That's just kind of how I am at least theorizing it. But again, you can run it whenever you want and however you want if you do have the confidence to do it. But that's that. The character with constellations does go up exponentially. Each constellation does increase in value higher than the next one. I would say his C1 is his weakest, then next strongest is C2, then next strongest is C4, and then after that I would say C6, just because it can change the way you play the character completely, essentially making the comp a little bit more different and a little bit more, fast-paced, if you will, right? But that's the character like that. Now we have to understand weaponry. Okay, now we're back. Let's get into the weapons. Out of the 5-star category, all of them will work. Probably least of all, probably Song of Broken Pines, because that is I believe, physical boost on the little ability here. That's probably going to be the least optimal just because of that factor, but all of the 5 stars do something good for you in some way, shape, or form. Song of Broken Pines and Redhorn Stonethresher are going to be some of the worst, because they have just conflicting parts of it. Obviously, he has crit damage, but it's defense increase through some methods, so it's going to be slightly less optimal than you would desire, but obviously the 88 crit damage is going to be pretty useful if you have it. But again, all of the 5 stars work. As for his best one, it's hard to come to a conclusion. If you need crit rate, Beacon of the Reed Sea can be good. If you need base attack, Wolf's Gravestone or the Unforged. If you need crit damage, Redhorn Stone Thresher, not Redstone Horn Thresher. That one for crit damage, and the other ones, if you just have them. I believe this one is energy recharge. Maybe this one is not going to be that great either, but it's not going to be bad. That is the thing to take away from now. None of them will be bad. It all depends on what stat you need the most, right? What stat do you need the most of right now? That also obviously does play a part into what artifacts and all that do you have available to you. So kind of look at what stat you're lacking, because obviously, as I said before, his DPS nest that I would recommend comes from him just building crit damage, crit rate, attack percentage in that order. So whichever one is lacking, try to get that one, I guess, as your weapon, right? try to do that. Now, as for the 4 stars, again, he's a DPS character, and for every generic DPS character, crit damage, crit rate, attack percentage is the hierarchy of everything. So Serpent Spine is going to be one of his best, just because, simply put, it's strong. Obviously, it's the Battle Pass one, but let's just get it out of the way. It's a Battle Pass weapon. It's probably going to be, or as a DPS weapon for the 4 stars, it's probably going to be one of his best, easily. Another very easy one to get out of the way, the Black Cliff Slasher. It's another DPS weapon and one of the better ones out there. 55% crit damage, and also just generally attack increase after defeating an opponent through the ability. You can't go wrong with this one, although you do get it from the in-game shop through the Stardust stuff. It's a bit finicky to get. I don't have any copies of it, to be quite frank with you, but this one, again, going to be a high contender for the main DPS role. And then after that, you kind of go into a few of the attack percent statistics, like the Luxurious Sea Lord. This one is an event limited time one, but if you do have it, it's not going to be bad, as it does increase burst damage, but also a lot of attack percentage. The Prototype Claymore also comes in clutch because it, well, you know, just base attack percentage with a proc chance thing for a small bit of damage there. Really, just attack percent weapons are also fine. The crit ones, obviously, the ones that provide any amount of crit are always going to be good. Now, as for support weapons and energy recharge weapons, you guys might be wondering, I would recommend it, really, if you do want to try, like, you think you're going to have some energy issues. It's not a bad idea to go for something like the Sacrificial Greatsword if you need a double cast of his skill to really get a bit more energy, as he does have an 80 cost energy ultimate. That is going to be the tough part. Now, obviously, in a few of the comps that I recommended, he is, you know, one of two or a solo Dendro character. And you may want to try to run an energy recharge weapon or an energy recharge build, potentially something through, you know, Emblem of Severed Fate. I'll get into the artifacts in a moment, though. But, you know, try to build up some energy recharge, because 80 cost is quite high. But, you know, those kind of weapons are few and far between if I'm talking about energy recharge weapons. You've got Sacrificial Greatsword and Favonius Greatsword. These are some of your better ones out there to do it. You know, obviously the Skyward Pride is fine, but generally speaking, it's not a bad idea to go for it if you are, you know, going for a specific team comp. More so the one that has only him as the Dendro character. If you do run, let's say, a dual Dendro, dual Hydro team for him, then you might be fine on energy, as you have another character to support you in that. But in the solo Kaveh one, you may want to think about it. And I would say Favonius Greatsword or Sacrificial Greatsword are going to be your best contenders for 4-star, and Skyward Pride may be your best contender if you want, you know, let's say an energy recharge damage hybrid, right? Those are kind of the best weapons so far. 5-star, all of them work if you're just looking for something to be done. Serpent Spine for 4-star and Prototype Archaic, as well as Black Cliff Slasher, are going to be some of your best ones for 4-star DPS. I would recommend Serpent Spine more so. If you don't have it, though, the other two are just fine. And as for the 4-star support category, let's say energy recharge support category, Favonius Greatsword or Sacrificial Greatsword are probably going to be some of the high contenders for energy recharge, because well, they're the classics, right? They're the classics. Sacrificial on crit, you gain more energy particles, and Sacrificial at, you know, R5, although that is a, you know, pretty high ask for like new players to get, you know, R5 Sacrificial Greatsword. You probably are going to get it quickly because it's quite a common weapon. R5, 80% chance to refund your skill every 16 seconds. Quite strong, quite powerful. So those are the weapon recommendations. Now, let's go into the artifacts. And for me, the artifacts aren't like incredibly difficult. It's just Deepwood of Memories. Let's just be real. There's nothing else you really can go for unless you're looking for a very specific stat. Like I mentioned earlier, Emblem of Severed Fate can be a very good one. If you are lacking some energy recharge, you can go for that 100%. But realistically, and not even idealistically, but realistically, Deepwood Memories is going to be his net best one. Because Dendro core damage, or bloom damage, is classified as Dendro. And seeing is like in some of the comps that I recommended, you're going to be running just him as Dendro, or him and one other Dendro character. So you need someone to do that 30% resistance shredding of Dendro. And who else to do it but the guy that's on the field attacking most of the time, right? Who else to do it but him, right? And one of the other, if you're running the dual Dendro team, you could obviously have that character do it, but it's going to be more finicky. Or, you know, if you're in the single one, you're going to want it, right? So realistically, Deepwood Memories is going to be easily one of his best. Some of the new ones aren't really going to do shit. Orokasha's Glow is not it. It's elemental skill and burst damage, and he does bloom damage, and that's not classified as either of those. Nymph's Dream, you know, normal. it's a fucking convoluted thing, but it gives you like an attack percentage boost and hydro damage bonus. So immediately you do not want that. And I have no idea why this is even being released here, but it is what it is. It might be fine for a future character. Who knows? Other than that, you got a few of the other ones. Elemental Mastery, you don't need it. HP, you don't need it. You don't need any of those other stats that you would generally need for a Dendro character, right? So Deepwood Memories is really just the best one to go for. It's going to be his best, and that's going to be my final message for this one. And again, as I've harped on about it for this whole video, probably the stat management is simple as hell. Crit damage, crit rate, attack percentage. Keep it simple, keep it safe, keep it everything, keep it nice and understandable, and that's it. That's Kaveh, that's everything. He's a great character depending on your situation. If you have what he, if you pre having him have what he needs to thrive, you're gonna have a great time. I think you're gonna have an even something called an amazing time. But trying to fit him into other team comps like Burn, Hyper Bloom, Aggravate, things like that, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a tough situation to fit him into those because he doesn't really do anything in them. He doesn't have anything to like any percentages based on those. He doesn't have any boosts depending on those. He doesn't have anything like that. It's not impossible because again, it's Genshin Impact, and here you can make even something like Chi-Chi or heal Barbara. You can make a DPS, so it's not impossible, but it's going to be difficult. So that is going to be my Kaveh analysis per se. Solid unit, great all around for these specific teams. Other than that, don't use the motherfucker. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like and subscribe to the channel, and hope you guys also enjoyed the special program as well as the video. Have a great one. Peace out.